and I welcome you on behalf of the Navajo County Bar Association. I am your moderator for today's forum, featuring 3 Republican candidates for Justice of the Peace at Precinct 5, located in Sholo, Arizona. From left to right, we welcome Joseph Clark, Jerome Lewis, and Shirley Patterson.
Thank you.
Each candidate is allowed a 2-minute opening statement. Our timekeeper, seated to my left, is the president of the Navajo County Bar Association, Adam West. When a candidate has 30 seconds left, Mr. West will flash a warning screen, followed by a 15-second warning screen. If a candidate runs out of time and is still talking, to be fair to the other candidates, I will interrupt and keep interrupting even if it's mid-sentence. Now, before we started, the order was randomly selected and will rotate with each section. So each candidate has a chance to respond first, in the middle, and to the last. The beginning statements will be followed by my questions, and then we'll end with closing statements. If any candidate wishes to have a question repeated, I will repeat it in full. A brief comment about this format to our viewers. The candidates have been told that they will make opening and closing statements, and the general nature of the very first question. All the other questions after that are complete surprises to them. This format does not allow candidates to address each other or go back and forth for questions from the audience or from viewers. This is hopefully designed to help you to get to know how a candidate thinks, how they communicate, and get a feel for who they are. We hope it aids you in your decision. It's always a challenge to function under pressure, so please recognize that this is not easy for them. We begin with our opening statements. Joseph Clark, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mary Claire. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Clark, and I'm running for Justice of the Peace here in Sholo. The job of the judge or the Justice of the Peace is just like any other tradesman. And the key to being a good tradesman is having the right tool for the job. And what I've done is I've created a toolbox over the several years that has allowed me to be filled with the brim for tools that are uniquely prepared for this particular job. My wife Sarah and I moved up here several years ago when I was offered a job to work for the county attorney, Brad Carlion. We didn't have kids at the time. We didn't know if we could have kids. We had tried in the past without success. And so we bought a house. It was a small home. And then, funny enough, we were able to have a daughter. And she was born in 2011. That's Caroline. She's 7 years old now. And 2 years after that, we had a second child, Joseph. And 2 years later, our third child, Allie, was born. When Allie was born, we realized that the house we had bought had become cramped and the size of it was being felt. So the time came to decide whether or not we wanted to stay here or whether or not we wanted to move on. When we first came up here, we thought we would be here 3, 4, maybe 5 years, get the experience needed to move on. But then when the time came, we prayerfully considered what we wanted to do, and we decided we wanted to be a part of this community. We wanted to be a part of this community because it was a place where we could raise our children in a way that fit our priorities, and especially when it came to having our priorities straight and put in the right order. We were able to put our family first, put our God second, and our country and our community third. It's still okay here to celebrate Christmas. It's still okay here to fly the flag of our country. And these are the values that we wanted to instill in our children. So we decided to be a part of this community and to stay in this community.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry, time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shirley Patterson, you're next.
Mary Claire. My name is Shirley S. Patterson, and of course you all know that I am running for Justice of the Peace, Precinct 5. I have lived in Sholo for 40 years. I am a proud graduate of Sholo High School, class of 1978. Go Cougars. I have been married to my husband, Ken, for 39 years. I have 3 children, Claudia, Matthew, and Daniel, all of which have graduated here at Sholo High School, and all of them live in the area, and they all work in the area as well. I have 5 grandchildren, PJ, which happens to be in the audience right now, Piper, Maddie, and Devin. And I also just had another one, 3-month-old Eli. Over the years, I've been very involved in the kids' activity. I've been a Brownie leader, a Girl Scout leader, soccer, baseball, football, whatever the kids had to do, we definitely were there and we encouraged that as well. I have been a member of the Sholo Chambers. I was once a member of Beta Sigma Phi Gamma Rho. Uh, I'm very involved with the Sholo Elks Lodge. My husband has been a member of that uh, association for quite a while. I've helped with the Lions Club. I most recently joined the White Mountains Women's Club. And so my community ties and my experience here at the court, that's one of the reasons why I decided to go ahead and run for the position of Justice of the Peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerem Lewis, your 2-minute statement.
Claire. My name is Jerem Lewis, and I am grateful for this opportunity to be running for Justice of the Peace. I love this community, and I love my country. I was born and raised right here in Sholo, just like Shirley. I'm a proud graduate of Sholo High School, class of 1996. I remember walking across the street when the building across the street was the only building with a payphone in town. I have fond memories. I grew up less than a mile from right here. I'm married to my wife, Christina, and have been for 18 years, and we have 5 children. My oldest is a senior in high school, and my youngest is a first grader. So we are right in the middle of activities, and like Shirley, we're running around crazy with football practice and soccer practice and everything else. My background was in law enforcement. I've spent many years here in the White Mountains as a police officer and as a community servant. I'm active in my church and have been my entire life. I believe in community service. I believe in the opportunity to give back. I believe it's a duty to our country to be able to serve and to our community. I am extremely proud to be able to run here in Sholo. I cannot explain the gratitude that I have to be able to be in a community that I love, to be able to be running for this office.
Thank you. Our first question is directed to Shirley first, then Mr. Lewis, then Mr. Clark. Ms. Patterson, why are you better qualified to hold this position than your opponents?
Mary Claire, I have been working for the Sholo City Court for about 20 years. I have been appointed as the Justice of the Peace Pro Tem in 2009. Since that time, I was also appointed as Associate Magistrate. I have probably presided over 1,000 cases, if not more, of all different varieties that include anything that is filed in the Justice Court. I am also a weekend IA, which is an initial appearance judge, which means that basically anytime over Navajo County, if anybody's arrested, I will see them over the weekend. I have the experience, I have the knowledge. A transition can be extremely easy. I can go right straight into the bench, walk right on there and be ready to start the day. So I feel that I am truly the best candidate for this position, basically because of my experience, my knowledge of not only as a judge, but also as a clerk of the court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
I feel like I'm the best candidate for this position because I'm the most well-rounded candidate. I have experience in the court, but I also have experience out amongst the people. I have been with them at their very worst moments. I have spent most of my adult life in law enforcement, and so I've been trained on making good decisions based on law, decisions based on people's rights. So I can come into the court and be able to approach somebody as an individual and as somebody that has um, gotten themselves in the middle of a mess, or if they need help simply, I believe my time in law enforcement has enabled me to show forth empathy, firmness, and compassion. I have had the opportunity to be in court. I understand the court system.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mary Claire. I've been protecting our community and our country since I joined the Marine Corps in October of 2000. For the last almost 10 years, I've been a member of the county attorney's office as a prosecutor, and I have handled thousands upon thousands of cases, the same cases that the Justice of the Peace will be handling every day. I am prepared uniquely to take on those challenges and those tasks. While I've been at the county attorney's office, I have created a couple of problem-solving courts. So I have a record of using our court system in a way that's more proactive, as opposed to waiting for bad things to happen. I have gone forth and I've made good decisions. I have a record of using common sense and good choices to help people change their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be directed first to Mr. Lewis, then Mr. Clark, and then Ms. Patterson. Each candidate has relevant experience in the criminal justice system. Candidate Lewis was a peace officer. Candidate Clark has experience as a prosecutor. Candidate Peterson has experience as a pro tem judge on criminal cases. Criminal cases are a large part of the court's docket, but there are many other types of cases that come before the court, such as orders of protection, forcible detainers, landlord-tenant problems, and property disputes over easements or covenants. Though the amount in dispute can't be over a certain amount, there's no limit to attorney fees. Please explain how you are qualified to handle these non-criminal issues and make an informed decision based on statutes and precedent and not based on your own internal sense of right and wrong. Mr. Lewis.
I'm thorough. I understand that if I am presented something that I need help with, I'm thorough in researching that. It comes down to common sense and what is right. I'll take both sides of any argument, whatever the case may be, as you've explained, and I'll approach it completely neutral and impartial. There's a due diligence to this position, due diligence to sit and to rule in a way that is appropriate. And I am committed to that. I was taught from a young boy to be fair and kind and to use common sense. I relied on common sense my entire adult life as a police officer, and being able to get through problems and to do it in a way that people's rights are not infringed and that problems are solved appropriately.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Mary Claire, I have a history of being able to read statutes, understanding the rules of different types of procedure in the courts. I have been trained and I have knowledge in all aspects of the law. Of course, I've been concentrated on criminal law, but those same skills apply to all aspects of the law. Being able to understand how to read statutes, how to interpret them, the rules of procedure. These are all skills that I've developed for a long, long time. And so I've written papers. I've written opinions when I clerked for a judge in Pennsylvania. So I know how that process works, and I've completed that process. I've argued in front of several judges, justices of the peace and Superior Court judges, both in Apache County, here in Navajo County, and even in Gila County and Coconino County. No one has appeared in front of as many judges as I have and had to argue the law, and I know the law. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson.
With my experience, I have sat on the bench and I've had people come in a week before Christmas because they're being evicted. It's one of the hardest things that you have to do is you have to, basically go through the process. And unfortunately, sometimes people have to be asked to leave a home. Small claims, I am a small claims hearing officer. I had over a week's worth of training, and I've handled many, many cases. And the one thing that people have to realize is that there's two parties to each case, especially when you're talking about these civil cases. Same things with injunctions against harassments or orders of protection. Everybody wants to give their side of the story, and you have to sit and listen to both sides, and then you have to make a ruling depending on what you're hearing. We hear these cases on a regular basis. We don't hear any easement cases in our court, but we do hear a lot of these cases, and they're very emotional, and you have to be there and be ready to be, as they said, fair and impartial.
Thank you. This next question is a bit on the long side. This November, Navajo County voters will be asked to approve a tiny 1/3% increase to our sales tax to make up for the drastic loss of revenue when both the Kayenta mine and the Choya power plant begin to close in December 2019. These financial blows are in addition to the previous financial burdens that were transferred by state government to county governments in an effort to balance the state's budget. One of the benefits of this proposed plan is that by incrementally increasing a sales tax, spreads out the increase over a wide number of people, including visitors passing through the county who stop to buy supplies, to shop, or to enjoy our beautiful White Mountains. It's considered one of the fairest ways to generate the amounts of revenue that are needed to replace what will be lost. While we hope this plan passes, we have to prepare for the possibility that it might not. County officials have projected that every single department will have to lose 20 to 25% of their staff. For a moment, please picture the impact this would have on our Show Low Justice Court. Previous cuts have already resulted in job loss and streamlining of processes. There's nothing excess left to cut out. Services across the board will bog down. If you are elected, this horrible scenario may fall on your shoulders if the jail district tax doesn't pass. It will be your responsibility to guide your staff and to make the difficult choices about who and what to cut. What will you do? What more can be done that hasn't already been done to run on profoundly less? This question goes first to Mr. Clark, then to Ms. Patterson, then to Mr. Lewis. Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Well, this is an interesting question. And one of the things that I bring to the table uniquely is that as a Marine Corps sergeant, I've been trained to do more with less. And that's exactly what I'll do. I have training in leadership. That's what we do is in the Marine Corps. We lead and others follow. And so I have no doubt that I will be able to navigate those troubled waters and we'll be able to be effective. We'll be able to continue to provide the services that our community needs. And we'll deal with whatever comes our way. One particular thing that comes to mind is use of pro tems. Pro tems are often used as a way to allow justice of the peace to have some time off. And I know that we can combine our efforts as justices of the peace so that we use pro tems less. Well, thank you.
Thank you. It'll be answered next by Ms. Patterson.
Thank you. I was very fortunate because yesterday I heard a very nice presentation in regards to the situation, and it's very serious. The one way that I can answer this by saying that if voters do not vote this in, we're going to see cuts all the way across the board. That means our law enforcement, our officers that are in the jail, it's going to be very serious. In the long run, what's going to happen is that we're going to see people that will not be cited for certain things, or we may have officers that are not able to go to an incident and be able to cite. We're going to see less filings in our court, and that's where our cuts are going to take place because our employees right now that we have that cover our actual caseload will no longer be needed because we won't have a caseload because we don't have the staff or the people to actually cite anything in. So it's a scary situation. It's something that we would have to work through, but ultimately, without that, it's gonna have a ripple effect.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Lewis.
It's a bad position to be in. I've been in bad positions, and I'm confident that I can handle those tough decisions. There's a saying that I was taught when I was a young boy: use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. It's not a situation that any of us would want to be in or inherit, but it's a situation that I'm confident that I would be able to navigate through. I'll roll my sleeves up and get it done. I'm a confident individual, and I can make hard decisions. I think another term is judicial creativity. I can think outside of the box, and I can get things done with less. I am completely confident that I can navigate hard times. I've done it in the past, and I can do it in the future.
Thank you. This next question will go first to Ms. Patterson, then to Mr. Lewis, and then to Mr. Clark. I believe it's fair to say that all three candidates are very supportive of law enforcement. It might lead someone to wonder if whoever is chosen might be unfairly predisposed towards always believing all police officers at all times. It's fairly common, in fact, for a defendant to loudly proclaim that he did not do what the officer claims he did. Sometimes a judge is faced with situations where it's the word of the officer against the word of the defendant, and there's no additional evidence from any source. To further make it harder, sometimes the defendant has absolutely no prior criminal record. So the officer is asserting that this previously law-abiding person acted completely differently. Now, the typical argument given about credibility contests is that the officer has nothing to gain by lying and that the defendant is trying to get out of a tough spot, so he has a reason to lie. Please address this issue with an answer that does not include that rationale. How are you going to remain fair and not biased towards law enforcement when part of your job will be to remain fair and make sure the defendant's constitutional rights aren't trampled? Ms. Patterson.
I've been on the bench and have had people come up in front of me that have been charged by an officer for something that they alleged they didn't do. They always have that opportunity to enter a plea of not guilty. If it ends up that it can't be resolved in a pretrial conference, it will go to trial or jury trial. They have that opportunity to make that statement. They have that opportunity to come out and say, here's my evidence, I didn't do this. Fair and impartial, you have to be. We are in a small community. We all know each other. We know officers. We know people. We see defendants that we see at the store. But you have to remain fair and impartial, and you have to remember that the officer has to be able to have enough evidence as to why he cited that particular person or arrested them. If he doesn't, then it's not an issue.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
I'm in a unique position to answer this question. I have been in court and have been asked to testify to prove the state. It's facts. It's what the evidence suggests. It's what is before you. I spent the last 8 years of my law enforcement career working narcotics and violent crimes. Spent time down on the reservation working homicide. You would walk into a scene and look at the evidence. I would completely expect any officer that would come before the bench to do a job that I expected of myself, which was I'm going to present the facts to prove my case. I can be completely fair and impartial. I've seen it on both sides. And so I, again, was taught as a young man to be honest, I will not show favoritism. I conduct myself professionally that way. I conduct myself as a parent that way with my children. I can be fair and impartial.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Mary Claire, I've had the opportunity to work closely with our law enforcement officers, both in the county and in the city, and I've been able to develop a unique relationship with them. And I've had to tell them no on numerous occasions when they've wanted to charge cases, when they've wanted to deal with people certain ways. I've had to tell them no, and I will continue to foster that relationship with our law enforcement community. The other thing that is unique about my experience is that I understand the burden of proof, and that is that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed a crime. And that is a high burden. And what that means is that ties go to the defendant. And I understand that burden, and I will exercise that burden judiciously, and I will foster that relationship with law enforcement. They have a relationship with me now, and we'll continue to have a strong relationship, one where they can know and trust my decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a scenario. And by the way, the order of answer is Mr. Lewis, Mr. Clark, Ms. Patterson. I'm going to give you a scenario that actually once happened to a local justice of the peace, in fact, at Sholo Justice Court. Appearing in front of you is a young woman, just turned 18, who's charged with the lowest level of shoplifting. The only information that is available that you can get, that is accessible to you, was that it occurred at a local supercenter and that the value of the items was around $10. At this stage, after advising her of her constitutional rights, you ask her whether she's pleading guilty or not guilty. You know that she's not entitled to a lawyer for this small offense, and you are not entitled to more information at this point. She tells you, "I'm guilty, Your Honor. I took things without paying." And she starts to cry a little quietly, looking down at her feet. She's obviously very ashamed of herself. You proceed to gather information for her sentencing by asking her for an explanation of what happened and of her circumstances. At this point, you're only getting information to figure out a just sentence. She's pled guilty. It's your job to sentence her. You've done nothing wrong procedurally, and there's really no other way to do the same thing legally. She tells you that she took a bottle of cough syrup because her infant at home was very sick and she didn't have any money to buy the medicine. She said she'd never steal for herself, but she was desperate to help her baby. Please tell us your sentence for this young woman. She did shoplift. She pled guilty. After all of you answer, I'll tell you how the actual judge handled the sentencing. Mr. Lewis.
Dismiss with restitution paid is how I would rule on that. Tough situation. There is due diligence. And these scenario questions are tough. If I win this election, I hope not to have a young mother come into my courtroom having gone through this exact scenario. But my gut feeling right then is right now is that dismiss with restitution paid. There are programs in the community for her. My heart breaks for her. Is there something that she could do? Otherwise, there's support out there. There's the WIC program. There's other programs out there that would be helpful to her, and I would steer her in that direction. I'd point her that way to be able to get the help that she needs, maybe financially.
Ready. Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mary Claire. I've been in situations where I've had to evaluate cases just like this. Small amounts of value have been stolen, and the culpability is low. Now, a judge can't just dismiss a case because he wants to, but what he can do, he doesn't have to accept a guilty plea, and he can refer it to the prosecutor. And because I have been a prosecutor, I know the resources that are available to them. I know the types of things that they can do. One of those things is a diversion program. And I'm confident that any prosecutor would be willing to divert a situation like that where they don't have to come out with a conviction. And so I would not accept that guilty plea, and I would refer it to the prosecutor and hopefully use my influence in a way that will come out with an outcome that will be beneficial to this woman and to her child and to the community as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson?
Sitting and listening to the different answers, the first thing that it's very important for people to understand is that when we have an issue like this, we have to make sure that our victim is whole, that they've been made whole again. So the first thing off the bat is you have to make sure that if there's any restitution, that's taken care of. A lot of times with these kind of cases, they're caught before they leave the store, so the actual product goes back to the store, and it's pretty much a moot point. As far as dismissal, that doesn't happen, not by the judge. That's something that only the county attorney can do. He can put a person on a diversion. For me personally, if and I have a little scenario here myself that I'm going to throw in, if this person's 18 years old and they're still in school, I would not have a problem at all with referring them to our teen court program, which is something that we can handle in that aspect. When she completes the recommendations from the jury, basically the charge would go away anyways. We could suspend fines. You could fine her and then say, if you have no more incidents, we'll suspend the fines. But there's different options, and you have different ways of taking care of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now that all three of you have answered, as Paul Harvey used to say, here's the rest of the story. The cough syrup was reshelved. It never made it out of the store. And the judge sentenced the young woman to return in 1 week with a list of people or agencies that she could have called for help instead of shoplifting. She did return 1 week later with pages and pages of names of churches, of agencies, and the names of neighbors and family and friends who were willing to help her. Turns out she didn't know how many people were out there willing to help her until when she returned, she was cradling her baby in her arms, and she wore a great big smile across her face. I believe that's the kind of justice many communities hope that we can receive. Thank you for your answers on that. This next question goes to Mr. Clark first, then Ms. Patterson, and then Mr. Lewis. People will appear before you who are repetitive offenders, deep into the cycle of alcohol or drug addiction. It's clear that at the point they're out, they'll need more than outpatient help to get better. Navajo County currently doesn't have residential treatment programs in the county for as long as 6 months. So when someone needs and wants residential treatment, they need to get to another county, especially for our female patients. Frequently, this obstacle is just too big for them. For instance, most don't have cars, and even if their family is emotionally supportive and wants to help, many families just can't afford to spend the money for a bus ticket or to pay for gas to get them down there to whatever city they need to go, like Tucson or Phoenix. Transportation to rehab, even as far as Tucson for a 6-month program, is far cheaper than housing someone in the jail for even a week. When you also consider that many people at this point in the substance abuse cycle will be in very poor health, and that the jail will have to pay every dime of the cost of their medications and medical treatment while they're there, it begins to sound like financial craziness not to get them to treatment as soon as possible. But our system is just not set up to cover things like transportation costs to treatment at the front end for low-level misdemeanor crimes that aren't involving supervised probation. But lower level crimes like shoplifting alcohol or shoplifting to support a drug habit are the types of crimes that do drain businesses. Catching the disease earlier will save huge dollars across the board, not to mention the help restoring the individual and the individual's family. Eventually, as the disease progresses, the crimes, of course, increase in severity. People have been talking for years that if we help get people off drugs and alcohol, it'll reduce crime and it will reduce our people in jail and the overall cost to the criminal justice system. Should we wait until people commit felonies before we intervene with this type of drug and alcohol treatment? Do these things have anything to do with being a judge in the criminal justice system? And if so, what? This goes first to Mr. Clark.
Mary Claire, I am very supportive of the effort to handle drug addiction, not necessarily as a criminal matter, but as a mental health matter. Obviously, that change has to come from Phoenix, from our state legislature. But in the meantime, I absolutely know that every criminal history I have ever read always begins with a misdemeanor in justice court, every single time. And I know that if we can handle things in our justice courts, they won't progress to felonies. And so one of the things I really want to do is use my experience in creating a veterans court and a domestic violence court to create a program where we can keep an eye on people, not just wait for them to fail, but to be more proactive and ensure that they're able to get the help that they need, be able to stop where they are and not progress in their lives of crime, and make our community a better and a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson.
In the lower jurisdiction court, we are pretty limited as far as what we can order somebody to do. We have mandatory sentencing for DUI and DV cases, which are the 26 weeks of DV counseling, or the mandatory assessments that come with the alcohol issues, which are alcohol counselings. As far as any in-house treatments, I personally have never ordered anybody to do that. However, we do have a great program that's already been implemented, which is our GPS alcohol home detention system. And this allows somebody, for example, you get a DUI and you don't want to spend 30 days in jail. We have ways of allowing them to spend part of that sentencing on their GPS. They pay for it, and it's not something that takes a lot of jail time, and it doesn't, affect the public. So, I mean, there are really good options out there in our court system, and we really utilize a lot of those good options. And yes, I do agree. We have to work in that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
That scenario is absolutely applicable to the position for which we're running for. If I know one thing about the people here in our community is that we are surrounded by good people, and we are surrounded by good organizations who want to help. I obviously would keep doing the things that the courts are doing now that are being successful. Some things don't need to change that are working. But if we need to do more with less, going back to your previous question, it's that judicial creativity. There are people of good faith, church congregations, other groups that would be more than willing to be helpful. I'm all for trying to create additional programs and help to try to heal the issue of alcohol and drug addiction.
Thank you. This will be your last question prior to your closing statements, and we'll go to Ms. Patterson first, then Mr. Lewis, then Mr. Clark. Some judges have said that when they become a judge, unexpectedly, they had to make quite a few changes in their personal life to avoid that judicial standard of appearance of impropriety. They suddenly have to be careful to whom they're speaking with at the grocery store, especially if a person has a case in front of them in the court. If someone walked past them while they're just saying hello, it could be misunderstood. So we often can't predict how big an impact can be. It may require extra unpaid hours or other personal sacrifices. Do you think your life would change if elected to this position? And if so, how? Ms. Patterson.
As I previously mentioned, I have been a pro tem for 9 years. My life has changed. There's no doubt about it. It hasn't changed. It's changed in a great way. And yes, I do run into people in the store, and yes, they do talk to me, and yes, they want my legal advice, which I tell them very nicely, I can't give you. Come see me at the court, and we'll see what we can do for you. My family is my best friends because that's who I hang out with quite a bit, but I haven't shut out the community. We live in a small community, and we don't have the option to send someone down to courtroom number 2 or number 3 or number 4. If you have repeat offenders or you have somebody that you have to handle every case individually, and you have to take it a step at a time depending on that. If you run into a situation where you might have a conflict or you might have talked to somebody that you shouldn't have and they end up in your courtroom, you just basically take yourself out of the picture. So living in a small community, you can still be who you are and still be a judge on the bench and still have friends. So
All right, thank you. Mr. Lewis?
I fully expect the position to change my life should I be elected. I absolutely would change my life. And if it does change my life, I hope that I would continue to remain approachable. I generally love people, and I want to be able to have people feel like they can talk to me. But I understand the separation. I do understand that separation. I've had people that I had contact with as an officer and as a detective approach me about things, and I, like Shirley, just simply explain, "Hey, this is inappropriate. We better not do this here." I would just follow that guiding principle of handling things appropriately and not giving off the appearance of something that is inappropriate. Um, I love this community, and I want to continue to be able to walk through Walmart and Safeway and not have people feel like they can't approach me because I'm a public servant. It should be the opposite.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Mary Claire, I had an experience once in this community. My wife and I went out to dinner, and our waitress was somebody I had just seen in court. And I've developed a protocol for how to handle these kinds of situations. And this lady was absolutely petrified. She brought us some soup, and she was shaking. It was spilled, and it broke my heart. But I have experience with these very issues. The life of a prosecutor and the life of a judge are not very dissimilar. We go into the community, we see the same people, we deal with the same cases. And it is absolutely essential to understand that the law is a people business, and we deal with people first. And as long as that is the attitude with which you move forward and you deal with people on a regular basis and you treat everyone as an individual, personally, and with kindness and charity and compassion, you just can't go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to our final portion. Candidates, you each have 2 minutes for your closing statement. The order will be Mr. Lewis, Mr. Clark, and then Ms. Patterson. Mr. Lewis.
As a young boy, I remember my father draping his arm around my shoulder and pointing to an individual that was sitting on the back pew of our church and said, "That's Ray Dahm. He is respected in this community. He was a highway patrolman, and now he's the judge. Go over and shake his hand." I walked over as a young boy and shook his hand, and it was then that I knew that I wanted to do something like that. I lived my life in a way that has prepared me to serve in this position. I love Show Low. I was born and raised here, and I want to be able to serve here. I feel like I have something to offer. My successes, my trials, my failures I've been through all of those things, and they have prepared me to be able to fulfill this position in a way that will show forth humanity to people. I will treat people as individuals. I have a high level of empathy towards people. As I look at my trials and again my mistakes and my successes, I want people to be able to be happy. I want families to be able to be whole. And I want people to be able to feel like they are at peace with themselves. So in serving in this position, I feel like I have something to offer. I would hope that as people are trying to make up their minds on who to vote for, that they would catch the spirit of my thoughts and they would catch the spirit of what's in my heart in wanting to be able to give back to the community. I would hope that they would take the time to research us even more and be prayerful about your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Thank you. I'm reminded of the movie Taken when Liam Neeson gets on the phone with the person who just took his daughter, and he tells him, I have a particular set of skills. And just like Mr. Neeson in that movie, I too have a particular set of skills. It's a different set of skills, mind you, but it's no less particular, and it's one that has been developed through years and years of dealing with people in cases of the same nature that we'll be dealing with on the bench in the justice courts. I too love this community. We've made a decision, an active decision to stay here and to be a part of this community. And in order to make a difference, you have to be different. You have to bring something to the table that is different, that sets you apart. And that's what sets me apart is this toolbox that I talked about earlier. This toolbox has been developed and is overflowing with tools that I have created, that I have learned from others. I've appeared in front of so many judges that I can't even count them, but I've learned from each one how to handle cases. I remember the first time I appeared in front of Judge Colomitz, Allison Colomitz in Winslow, and I had a situation where somebody was visiting from Japan with his wife, and he treated his wife inappropriately and was needing to get back to Japan. And we were at a stalemate, and Judge Colomitz took me aside, and she offered some advice and some wisdom from all of her years on the bench, just as shortly before she retired. And I've learned something like that from each one of the judges I've appeared in front of. And that is, again, the thing that sets me apart is this toolbox that I've created. No one has the experience I have. I've handled thousands of cases upon thousands of cases. I have dealt with so many hardships. I have helped people throughout their lives. There's nothing more rewarding than having a defendant come and thank me for the way that their cases have been handled. Again, I've created a couple of problem-solving courts, and so I want to use these courts more proactively. And that's really my message. Let's do more, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Patterson.
Well, I can tell you right off the bat, 1 minute is not enough on some of these questions, which shows you that I'm very, very passionate about what I do and how long I have done it. I truly love my job, and I have been blessed to be able to work at this kind of a career. There are certain things that happen in the court system right now that I would like to make sure stay. Our teen court program is extremely successful. I want to make sure that victims' rights are a big portion of any case. If the victim is there, I want to make sure that they're heard. I want to start working towards maybe some mentally ill patients, not patients, but defendants that we have. Are there other ways to take care of these cases? Our GPS home monitor system, alcohol system, is perfect for helping the jail fees, which the cities right now incur. So we want to think about that because that's a great, great way to move forward. Our veterans, as we've talked before, we do have a veterans court. However, that's handled out of Superior Court. So we have cases that are sent up to the veterans court at the recommendation of the county attorney. Disposition reportings. We have people that are going and buying weapons that really shouldn't have weapons because their disposition report didn't get filed timely. These are issues that we have worked on for years and we continue to work on. We have them set and we want to continue to make them successful. My ability to have that knowledge and to move forward on these kind of issues is one of the best reasons why I should be your judge for the next 4 years. My experience, my goals. I've worked with Judge Price for 16 years by his side. We have put procedures together. We've done a great job of doing that. And I have the support of Judge Price, and I do have the support of the staff there. It would be an easy transition. As I told you earlier, straight from the clerk's office right to the chambers and onto the bench. I can do it. It's something that's there, and I enjoy the job. So vote Patterson for Justice of the Peace, and you'll make the right decision. Thank you.
The results of voting or not voting will affect your life, and we live now in serious times. By watching this program, listening carefully to what's been said and how it's been said by each candidate. And by deciding which candidate aligns best with you, you're already setting yourself apart by showing that you do care and you want to make a good, important choice that may ultimately have a profound impact on someone's life and the life of the community. Maybe that someone will even be someone you love and care about. For any friend or acquaintance of yours who doesn't intend to vote, consider posing this question to your friend. If you were a passenger in a car hurtling 80 miles an hour straight towards a solid brick wall, would you calmly comment, "You know, I'm not saying anything about where we're headed because I'm so sick and tired of all the bickering that's been going on about what road to take and where to stop for gas. Besides, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. It's just all rigged"? Wouldn't you instead do everything in your power to slow down the car and change its direction? You certainly wouldn't give a helpless shrug and say, "Well, I have better things to do instead of voting." Voting is not just a right, it's an essential part of the process of government. Please mail in your ballot or vote at the polls on Tuesday, August 28th. Adam?
On behalf of the Navajo County Bar Association, I want to thank you, the candidates, for coming out on such short notice. I want to thank you, Sholo TV, for extending your time and talents. And I want to thank you, the viewers. Please make sure you get out and vote this election. Thank you.